friend. Happy New Year and welcome to 2026. I am sitting here like many of you. I have a fresh daily planner and my favorite notebooks, and I'm armed with all the things that I'm going to need to tackle my most challenging goals this year. Hopefully, you're going to be right here alongside me. But one thing that I've realized, and for many of us, myself included, all the goals in the world won't actually get us to the finish line unless, and this is a big one, we have built the scaffolding around our goals to make them stable, or at least more accurately to help us lock in on what needs to happen in order to make those goals actually achievable. I'm so happy that you're here with me today on our first episode of 2026, episode 349. And I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about a process that I go through to both review the year that's passed, but really kind of hit the reset button in a way that helps me make my goals more stable. So I'm excited to have you here. Now, let me be clear about something. I actually think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to. But I thought that since it is the beginning of a new year, you might appreciate a few of the practices and a few of the little traditions that I have used now for many, many years that help me create both momentum, but also that embed those goals directly into my psyche. And this is such an important part. For many folks, dare I say the vast majority, here's what tends to happen. January 1st rolls around and we are so ready. We've got that clean slate energy, a clean desk, a plan for decluttering the rest of our home and our office, a goal for losing those pesky extra pounds. Maybe a new you can do it all journal or plan, and you've got highlighters and fancy pens to color code it all with. That extra special planner you bought that makes you feel like you could literally run a small nation. I don't doubt that you could do so, by the way, but maybe not because of your planner. Here's the bottom line, though. We make plans. We set goals. We swear we're going to be a whole new person because the calendar has flipped to a new year. But then you already know what happens. January rolls along, work ramps up, schedules get packed or overpacked. Somebody, maybe you, gets sick. Something breaks in the house or with somebody. Something big falls through, all the things, and the world keeps going and going, even though you've packed your life and your plate so very full. Then you blink and suddenly it's mid-month or maybe even early February. And you're like, wait, what was I trying to do again? Now, colloquially, the nickname for that early year goal dip is called Quitter's Day. I don't love that term because I've never thought it accurately captures what's really going on. It's honestly less about quitting and more about lacking the scaffolding around those big plans to keep them on track even when life becomes chaotic, because it will. The missing piece, I think, is actually a lack of anchoring those goals and those plans to why they mattered in the first place. So that's what I want to talk about today. Some of the ways that you can build that critical scaffolding without all the hype, without the pressure, and without a giant life overhaul. You probably don't really need that. We're going to use things that are already available to you and that hold the real secret to moving yourself forward in the ways that are most important to you. And a quick note before we jump in, if you want a little, I would say, companion to this episode, something that you can use as a complement to it when you find that you have an extra few minutes here and there, and maybe you need some inspiration, I created a free She Said, She Said reflection workbook. It is inspired by the entire last season of this podcast, all of my episodes from last year. And it includes more than 100 different reflection prompts. You can take from this workbook what you need. You can skip what you don't. But if you download it and use it, I would genuinely love to hear what resonates with you, maybe what surprised you when you went through the questions, and how these questions actually began to shape your mindset going forward. I have found these questions to be very revealing, but honestly, it does require sitting with them a bit. So you'll want to make sure that you have a little time and a little space for this. You can grab the workbook via the link that I've provided in the show notes or go directly to my website at lauracoxkaplan.com. Okay, back to today, though. Here's the plan. We're going to do three things. We're going to do a year in review that actually helps give you some clarity around potential goals. We're going to consider a word of the year strategy that you can use for selecting and really using your word. And then third, I'm going to share my 2 words. I actually have 2 for this year, not because these should be your words, but because they're a good example of how this all works. Okay, let's jump in. One of the most important lessons that I've learned about goal setting relates to the importance of mining the previous year for clues about those deeper reasons for where your goals actually stem. Now, most people jump into January and they say, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds and I'm going to decolor my closets and I'm going to spend more time with my friends and I'm going to get a new job and promotion and la, 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 la. Those are all great, terrific goals. But without actually looking back on the past 365 days, you will probably end up with a patchwork of goals that aren't actually tied to why these particular objectives are most important to you. But when you look back, you inevitably find that your life and how you spent your time last year actually left some really important clues. Your calendar left clues. Your camera roll left clues. For me, my pile of more than 14 notebooks that I filled up this year also left really big clues. Now, for me, when I look back, I'm often surprised by where my time went. Sometimes it's like, oh, wow, that's where all my time went. And then sometimes it's like, wait, I did all of that? And then I open up my photos on my phone and I see those moments that really jumped out to me, the ones that made my heart skip a beat or made me stop and take note of something really beautiful that I wanted to hold on to. Maybe it was a moment or something that I saw. Now, certainly that relates to the people that I spent time with and what I learned from them or what we shared together, including some of the incredible guests who joined me on this podcast, or how they enriched me, how you, my listener, and your feedback enriched and shaped my year. But it's also how I responded to color in my surroundings, or if you're somebody who really responds to visual things, you know what I'm talking about, how maybe an image or a color or a particular room literally moved me. Now, the calendar shows what you were committed to over the last year, the meetings, the calls, the engagements, the events, while the photos actually help fill in the gaps and they show you what you actually noticed, what you wanted to remember, what made you pause in that moment. Now, I'm a very aggressive photo taker for this reason. I always have several moments where I'm going back through the scroll from the past year and I'll stop and say, oh, right there, that was the good stuff. I had forgotten about that. Sometimes it's a big moment, but frankly, I tend to remember those. More typically, it's those smaller, really magical moments, maybe a table set for dinner, or a sunrise or a sunset, a random laugh, driving with my kids or with my husband, maybe a walk outside on a random Tuesday and just enjoying the color of the leaves against the blue of the sky. For me, there's also usually a few photos, especially from the summer, where I can literally feel my nervous system exhale. It's often maybe that ferry photo as we head over to Martha's Vineyard for the season. Or maybe it's a photo of my dog, Lucy, doing what she does best, just reminding us that petting her means we need to take a break. Or one of those family table photos, often with my kids in protest, where I'm immediately brought back to that moment, to the silly stories or some incredibly interesting observation that one of my kids said. And I say to myself, remember, this is it. This is the thing. So here's the actual practice and what I like to do. I sit down with my calendar, with my photos, and all my notebooks just before or right at the beginning of the new year, and I do a quick review. Now, typically, I don't do this all in one sitting because that would take a lot of time. I just grab a few minutes here and there as I have them, time when I can really focus and think about the last 365 days. It's kind of like a pattern hunt, if you will. And then I open up a document on my computer and I write January through December. And under each month, I jot down what stood out, the big moments, the small moments, the hard moments, the bright moments, dark ones too. I look at meetings I had that really had an impact. I look at conversations that I had. I'm looking for anything that captures my attention, areas where I moved the ball, or maybe places where I had tremendous setbacks, but where I learned a tremendous amount. And then I label all of these things with categories so that I can see what kept showing up. Now, these particular categories I've used for a long time, but I've adjusted them in order to align them with what's most important to me in a particular season of my life. But they typically evolve around categories that you might expect: relationships, wellness, growth, and inspiration. But for 2026, I actually made a few adjustments in those categories so that I could incorporate what I learned last year during my positive psychology training. I wanted to make sure that all the elements that help us to truly thrive in life, those scientifically based elements, were actually present here. But I also added in three additional dimensions that I believe serve as what I like to call an operating system of sorts. Now, honestly, this list of 8 categories is pretty comprehensive, but if there's something missing that resonates with you, add it. And be sure to let me know because I'm always looking for your feedback. Most of all, this list, however you construct it, should work for you. Now, if you're listening to this and you're driving or you're cooking or you're doing something else, I've included these categories in the show notes so that you can grab them there. But here they are. Awareness. What did I notice this year about what energized me versus what drains me? What patterns, good or hard, showed up again and again? What about stories? What stories was I telling myself about this experience? And is that story actually accurate? Number 2, intention. What did I choose on purpose this year? The yeses, the nos, the boundaries. Where did I act from my values instead of my mood? Then number 3, mindset. What story did I rewrite about myself or my work or my season? Where did I practice a growth mindset when things got messy? Number 4, relationships. Who strengthened me and who did I strengthen in return? Where did I find connection and community or collaboration that really mattered? And number 5, engagement and flow. When did I feel most in it, most focused and absorbed and creatively alive? What made time disappear? Number 6, meaning. What mattered most deeply, even if it wasn't easy? What reminded me what I'm here for? Number 7, accomplishment and progress. What did I finish or build or ship or create or stick with? What am I most proud of that I handled even quietly, including those things, as I said before, those setbacks, those areas that you could call a failure? What did I learn from those? And then number 8, well-being and positive emotion. What supported my body and my brain, my sleep, movement, food, and calm? What brought real joy and awe and laughter and gratitude? Now, this also happens to overlap with awareness. Here's why I think this list works really well. 5 of these categories map right onto the core ingredients of flourishing, as I said before: relationships, engagement, meaning, accomplishment, and positive emotion. These are the 5 categories identified by Martin Seligman and others in the field of positive psychology that are key ingredients to building a life in which you can truly thrive. Now, at a time when so many people are struggling and so desperately unhappy, these are some really critically important things to keep in mind. But Those first three things, awareness, intention, and mindset that I mentioned a moment ago, those are the things that help you apply these concepts and actually bring them to life. Because what you notice, what you choose, and the story that you tell yourself and others affects everything. And that's basically it. And here's what really is kind of amazing, I think. When you do this, you start to see your year like a story. You start noticing the plot lines. You start seeing what kept showing up and what you're ready to stop repeating. Now, for simplicity's sake, I want to boil all of this down to maybe 3 key questions that you can ask yourself. Once you do the review, ask yourself, what do I want to hold on to and carry forward or keep? What am I done dragging into next year? What do I want less of? That's release. Number 3, what do I want or need more of or need to build or create more of? And that's create. Those 3 questions provide a really important and very simple scaffolding, and they usually lead you straight to some great suggestions for either a word or maybe a couple of words that can become your North Star for the next year. Now, what makes the word of the year really helpful is when you actually spend some time reflecting on where you are, where you've been, and where you want to go, rather than just picking up a word that sounds good. There are lots of great choices and actually an endless supply of options, if you will. But if you want a word to actually help center you when things get sideways, it's more likely to help you do that when it's anchored to these particular sentences. I typically find that my word or concept tends to show up again and again as I review the past year. I just keep seeing it over and over again. Now, let's dig a bit deeper into word selection and maybe a few best practices. First, try to choose a word that guides a practice, not just an outcome. Outcomes are what you want, whereas practices are what you can do. And a few examples of that: successful would be an outcome versus consistent would be a practice, or calm versus steady, confident versus courageous, healthy versus nourished, less stressed versus boundaried, more productive versus focused, more joyful versus grateful, that kind of thing. A practice is something you can do even when your mood is messy and your schedule is full. Now, next, think about choosing a word that helps you when you have decisions to make or when you find yourself at a juncture point. Your word can often help you answer, is this a yes? Is this a no? Or is this a not right now? And then try to choose a word that serves all the parts of your life. Because as you know as well as I do, life does not stay in its lanes. Your personal life and your professional life overlap inevitably. And so you need a word that actually can accommodate that. Next thing you do is aim to anchor your word to your personal why and to the person that you aim to be and the way that you want to show up both for yourself and for others in your life. This is the scaffolding part. When you know why something matters, it is so much easier to build support around it, to create boundaries and reminders and systems that actually help. Okay, I want to share with you my words for 2026, and I picked 2 this year. I picked alignment and discernment. I'm sharing these because they are a clear example of how a word or words can actually act like that important scaffolding. Now, for me, discernment helps me notice what's true in me and around me, whereas alignment helps me choose what matters on purpose. Now, let me tell you why I chose these words. It was because of something that I noticed about myself this year. And if I'm honest, I'll admit this is not the first time that I have noticed this particular tendency. When things get busy for me or emotionally messy, I can often default into doing what's urgent and loud and what's right in front of me, instead of stopping in that moment to ask myself what truly matters the most. Now, I have always tried to do this, but it remains something that I really have to work on. I've often mentioned on this podcast that I struggle a bit with busy girl syndrome. I know I'm not alone in that. And then I'll have that moment, maybe you've had it too, where I realize I've been living on autopilot for weeks, not because I don't care, but because I'm human. And so the word discernment is me catching the autopilot sooner. And then alignment is me choosing a direction once I notice that. It's the moment when I ask, okay, what matters most today really? And then I choose one or maybe two things, not 10. And to be clear, my to-do list typically does include quite a few things. Sometimes it's as many as 50. I know yours probably does too, but I try to zero in on just a couple of things that will matter the most. If I get to other things, that's great, but I need to pick at least a couple. And I call those my most meaningful move or moves. And all that means is just one or two small things. If it's the only thing that I truly do today, it will make me feel like I showed up for what and who matters most. Maybe it's related to my relationships, making that important phone call, sending the text, reconnecting with somebody, or maybe strengthening a connection to build my network. Maybe it's related to my wellness, taking that extra walk to get in a few more steps, or prepping my food so that I reduce that tendency I have to grab for processed options. Or maybe it's protecting my sleep, being in bed at a consistent hour so that I can hit the floor the next morning rested and ready. Maybe it's related to something that I'm building that really needs my mental focus and more of my creative capacity that day. Or maybe it's leadership, having a conversation that I've been avoiding. And this is particularly important. I don't just hope I will do this. I try to decide when I will do it. Which window of the day will I devote to this most important thing? Like, I'm going to do it right after I write this email or draft this copy, or I'm going to do it at 10:30 in the morning, right after that meeting. That, friend, is the scaffolding that really helps you create structure around what you want to accomplish. Now, what discernment looks like for me and why it helps, I think, gratitude and a growth mindset is that it helps me catch patterns early. Noticing my stress before it turns into snappy girl, a nasty tendency that I'd very much like to break, but have had some trouble doing so. Maybe it's overwhelm before it turns into numbing out. Maybe it's the story I'm telling myself, noticing that, discerning that before it becomes a locked in as true, even if it doesn't actually tell an accurate story at all. But discernment also helps me channel gratitude and a growth mindset. The part of me that still looks for the good and the beautiful and the possible, even when the circumstances are much more messy and really dark. So discernment sounds like, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? What's the story I'm telling? Is it fair and is it accurate? What's still good here that maybe I'm overlooking or just missing altogether? Again, this is not toxic positivity. It's just not missing your life. Now, let's talk for a moment about how to make your words stick without being super intense about it. Once you've landed on a word or two, maybe a few words, try to define what that word means to you in one sentence. And here I'm going to give you an example of mine. Alignment for me means I choose what matters before the day chooses me. And then for discernment, I notice what's happening. I force myself to take a beat so that I can respond with wisdom and thoughtfulness instead of impulse. So for you, as you're listening to this and maybe thinking about your word, try out a few options and maybe fill in the sentence, my word is X, for me it means Y. And just give it a try. See what actually feels good. Okay, now that we've done that, let's anchor your word to things that you already do. So, for example, when I take my first sip of coffee in the morning, I'll ask myself, what matters most to me today? And typically, I write it down in one of my 12 to 14 notebooks that I create over the course of the year. Maybe it's when I sit down to my desk and open my laptop, I might ask myself, what is my emotional weather vane telling me right now? And then as I'm getting into bed at night, naming those 3 things that worked today, even if it was hard, really trying to lock in on both discernment and gratitude. This is simple and it helps to create some consistency, and it's based on real life. Now, another step you might want to consider is at the end of the week, ask yourself, where did I live my word? Where did I drift and why? And what's one small adjustment that I might make to help get myself back on track for next week? So, friend, in closing, whether you're feeling excited about a reset this year in 2026, or maybe you're feeling overwhelmed, I want to offer this one additional piece of advice. Just start wherever you are. You do not need a perfect plan. All you need are some clear reasons, your own reasons, and some scaffolding that supports those reasons when life throws you a few curveballs. Remember, start with those 3 simple questions as you reflect on the past year. What do you want to keep? What are you ready to release and let go of? What do you want to create or build more of? And then let your word find you. And remember, if you want a complimentary set of reflection questions that might also be helpful, grab the free reflection workbook on my website. Use what you need, skip what you don't, and please be sure to tell me what you notice. And if you choose a word for 2026, I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear why you chose that particular word. Friend, I have some really amazing content that we're working on for the rest of this year. And so I want to be sure that you've subscribed to She Said podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and that you're also following me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I will be sharing lots of complimentary material there as well. And I would love to have you with me as we roll all those great things out over the course of this year. Also, we will be doing our 4th collaboration series with the Southern Sea later this spring, and I am so excited to share that and some of the amazing women from that network with you. I'll also be sharing some ways that you can leverage AI tools to reduce your mental load and give you more time and brain space for what matters most to you. I am trying out some new techniques as we speak and having great success with them, and I'm very excited to share those with you too. Until next time, though, Happy New Year, friend. Thanks again for joining me here at She Said podcast, a weekly production of She Said Media. I'll see you soon. Take care.